start with Hugh this morning, but we'll kick off. So just a reminder, we are recording. For those that can't make it this morning on the Connect and Share, we always record it, throw it onto our YouTube channel. That way people can catch us up at a later time, should they so desire. So good morning, everyone. Laurie Mode here from Outdoors New South Wales and ACT. With me is also Helen from Outdoors New South Wales and ACT with a beautiful background, which we can now see. And Helen is our programs coordinator, and we welcome everyone to.
I'm on.
It's stunning, isn't it? Okay, so first of all, may I please acknowledge, and I do this voluntarily, that I want to acknowledge the traditional owners and the lands in which we all meet today, and may I pay my respects to all Aboriginal people past, present, and the emerging leaders in which we hope to connect with more and more as we understand more about the lands in which we use for our everyday interpretation and activity. So as I mentioned, we've got a guest speaker this morning who is not only an award-winning guest speaker, he has done some great work in the pay and conditions side of the industry and working with particularly the leaders in the space and trying to understand a little bit more about some of the challenges when it comes to pay and conditions. But Hugh Sutherland, as I mentioned, he won the Outstanding Contribution Young Achiever Award for Tourism this year. So Hugh, I'm going to hand over to you immediately because I know you've got to dash off, and we're really keen to hear from you around some of the outputs that you found.
Yep, thank you very much. I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen and then I'll jump into it.
Sounds good. Me.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for having me, and I'd like to thank Laurie for organising this, and hello to everyone who's here. I don't know everyone, but I'm looking forward to sharing this data with you and what's been going on with it. So to sort of start off, I'm going to talk a little bit about behind the survey itself and sort of why I decided to do it. So as I'm sure that you are all aware, pay and conditions and the discussion around pay and conditions in the outdoors is as old as the industry itself. It just happens all of the time. And recently, like in the last, say, 10 years, social media has created a platform for the discussion to become even more heated. And the thing that I constantly ask myself when I'm reading a lot of these on different pages is how constructive is this discussion? What are we getting out of it? It can be repetitive, like one week you'll have this discussion, the next week you'll have this discussion. What are we actually achieving out of that? And sometimes it's very fueled by personal biases and people's emotions that are connected to their situations as well. And the other thing is, outside of the social media discussions, I was aware that at the peak body level, so at a state and national level, there were discussions being had around pay and conditions, but the question I really had was who, from a group leader or activity instructor or adventure guide, where was their voice in that particular conversation? Was there anyone who was directly one of those people, and how can we represent them in that conversation? So those sort of questions really triggered me to design this survey, and it's sort of the origin to purely grab an information from the industry to put it together to be usable and representation of the people who are working on the ground. So the sort of aim, as I just talked about, is to represent employees and the conditions that they work under across our whole sort of industry, but to hopefully use the data to identify what we do well and what we can work on. But also, I think education is a really good thing. So just by doing the survey, people have probably learned something and educated themselves about talking to their employers about contracts or hours or first aid kits or whatever they may be. And that was definitely one of the goals of having this particular survey as well. So as you can see there on the screen, I'm going to talk a bit about the origin of the questions. So I really wanted to sit down and think not only about my own personal experience, but from conversations of others, what were some of the things that were regularly occurring for people? And that's really where the questions came from observing the discussions that really were popping up and some of the things I'd experienced myself. So things about hours and the conditions that we're under. Now, I have been asked quite a lot, it's like, why was pay not directly in the survey? And the reason I decided to do that is, and it might be my own personal belief here, is that if we get the conditions down and we look at just the conditions, the pay can come after that. And if we start to put pay in it, people tend to say, oh no, we should be paid this amount. No, we should be paid this amount. And I think that keeping that out of it for the time being and just looking at the background behind the pay seemed like a more constructive approach. And then the quality of the information. So it's also something I've been asked a fair amount of. And I think the more people that fill out the survey or have filled out the survey, the higher the quality of the information. And, you know, another thing I've been asked is, how do you know that the people filling it out don't have a bias or a sort of intention behind filling it out? And I think, again, it just goes to how many people we got to fill out the survey that shows the quality of the information. So jumping right in, so we can see there we've had about 340 people just under fill out the survey. And this slide here, it shows how the majority of people are employed in the outdoors. And we can see that the majority, or the highest percentage, are employed casually there. And for me, this was no particular surprise. We do rely on a large casual workforce, you know, where people are casually freelancing and they can choose where they want to work and when they want to work. Some questions when looking at this that popped into mind is sort of the sustainability of this for the employees and for the employers. So for an employee, having this casual employment, is it something that they can go and then they can have a career? Can they support themselves? Can they end up like having a family and supporting them from that casual employment? And then for the employers, is it also sustainable to continually have a casual workforce with things like training on procedures, program areas, clients' needs and specialised activities that might just be for their operation? It also came to mind with, like, if I've got one particular employee working at this business and one over here, and they might have contradictory SOPs as well. So how sustainable is that in the long run if I'm going to have to keep training casual employees year after year who might come in and out of the industry? What was also really interesting is actually the amount of full-time permanent people on this chart. And to be honest, I was not expecting that, but it's really good to see that that is the second highest amount that we have on this chart here. Another interest.
I think Hugh, the other Hugh, has a question quickly.
Yeah, look, just bump it if it's a red herring, but I'm just looking up in the top left-hand corner. We've got answered 338 and skipped one.
Yep.
Is that bad data that you've pulled out of there, or is
no?
that...
So each individual has the ability to skip a question. Yeah. And you'll see as we go through, usually those numbers are pretty low. They can just skip through.
Yep. Yep. Thanks for that.
No, that's all right. The other thing on this particular chart is you can see there's about 10% or just over there on contracts. Now, I wasn't quite sure initially whether this is people who were contracting or working on an ABN, or whether they were on some form of contractual agreement as well. Just something to note there from that. So now here we're looking at the amount of hours that we're have contracted or an employment agreement to work versus the hours that we actually work. So you can see that the majority of people are employed on their contractual agreement to work between 7 to 12 hours. So we can see there that green one on the left there, it's up to around 40%, and then the blue is just under 20% there. So the majority of people are working between 7 to 12 hours as per their employment agreement. But if we have a look at the chart there on the right, we can see that there's quite a change. That green, the 7 to 9 hours goes down, and that more people are working the 13 to 15 hours is the bigger column. And then somewhat potentially concerningly is you can see that there's a group of people that are working 16 to 18 hours. And if you compare it to the chart to the side, there's only a small group of people who are actually contracted to work that amount. Also, you'll see that there's a group on the chart on the left that says, others please specify. This is a group that may not have an employment contract, varies greatly for them, or they may just not know. Yeah. So this is having a look at the type of work that we're doing in the field. And you can see there we've got all the different options from in the field for a single day, in the field for overnight, centre-based for single day, overnight, office-based, and another one. And we can see there that the majority of us are in the field overnight. Now, the other please specify, most of those people there are actually working across multiple different things. So they might be doing overnight or in the field for a single day. So when I was looking at those answers, most of those people work across multiple different fields. So this is having a look at overnight work in the outdoors and whether we're being paid to be out in the field overnight and how that comes about. And it's something that is heavily discussed over the years, is how do we pay and what is enough and for an overnight fee. So we can see that the largest chunk of that pie chart there, they're not paid an overnight fee for being out in the field. And then the second largest is I'm paid a flat rate for an overnight, regardless of the hours that might be involved with that. The other please specify, a lot of those were to do with people who were on full time, and they might have like time in lieu agreements and things like that that were going on. Later on, we're going to compare this particular chart to some other things that are going on to do with hours worked, and we'll have a bit more of a closer look. Now we're looking at the longevity. So how long do we work in the outdoors? I thought this was quite interesting. It was not exactly what I was expecting. You can see there that the 16 plus years had quite a lot of respondents. And I think that's because that by the time that you've worked that amount in the industry, you're probably very engaged and really are involved either in a business or operations or something like that, or you're just really passionate, you're in there as a career. But you can see that the smallest amount of people is that 8 to 10 years, but then below that, from 0 to 7 years, there's lots of people in those boxes, but then there's a drop off. So it's interesting, it potentially could indicate that after that 5 to 7 year period, people are leaving the industry and going and finding other careers. And then a few people are going through for the long haul. So it's an interesting chart. It says a little bit about the spread. But what a really positive thing of this particular chart is to see how many people who are starting off were engaged in this survey from 0 to 2 years, 2 to 4 years, were really engaged in this.
Could be just a 7-year itch, Hugh. Tends to be a thing right across various industries, but yeah, good point.
And just to, I suppose I should have said this at the start, all of this theorising is of my own opinion and volition. It doesn't represent anyone else, but my own opinion. I just want to be pretty clear on that.
Good.
So now we're going to have a look at a few different charts together and have a look at how long we're actually working in the field. So we can see that one that's on the upper right there. We can see that we've got about just over 30%. They're in that 13 to 15 hours column, and then another 10% that are at 16 to 18 hours. So that's 40% of people that are working 13 to 18 hour days, which is that's a very long day. And if you have a look as well, nearly say 45% of people are doing in the field overnight. So that means that potentially we've got individuals who are working a 15, 16 hour day, but are also overnight in the field. So we've got people in our industry who are working very, very long days, and it could be days back to back to back. So some of the things that I sort of took from this is, what does it mean for that guide in particular? I think fatigue management was a really big thing that stuck out for me, and fatigue management, and then risk for the employer. So if I've got guides who are working these long days for a 5-day program, they have a day off and then they have to do the same the next week, does that guide have a built-up fatigue over that period of time, and can they make good judgment-based decisions about my clients in the field? And then for an employer, what is my SOPs and risk assessment about that fatigue management for my staff if they're doing those long programs? So this is having a look at, again, how we're employed in the field against whether we are getting paid overnights. So as we talked about earlier, about 45% of people are working overnight in the field. But then we can see that the largest chunk in our pie chart down here are not being paid for an overnight fee. And then again, another large chunk that are being paid a flat rate as well. So I'll answer. Sorry, Dom, you have a question?
Yeah, is that, sorry mate, is that pie chart, is that of people who work overnight in the field, or is it for everyone? Sorry, I was just a bit, because you know what I mean, like
question.
if you,
so
if
all
you,
of it,
yeah.
all of the data is from everybody. So
Okay.
it's not specifically just people who work overnight in the field. All of the data is from all 300 and nearly 40 people that were put together.
Okay, because that actually could all, I think I think it's confusing, because that could also be why they're not paid an overnight fee, because they don't do any overnight work, because a chunk of the people in that one up the top left, but I suspect there's also people out there doing overnight work who don't get an overnight fee, if you know where I'm coming from. I think it's a mix of both.
Yeah, I think, Hugh, I can help you probably find that question by filtering who actually responded to working in the field, and then we can get that result. which is it's a good point. Yeah.
Thanks for your question, mate. And yeah, you're right. It's like we haven't gone and surveyed those particular people to do like that work overnight in the field. And again, this is just me looking at the charts and making my own theories and opinions from that. But no, I appreciate your question. So we've got these 3 different charts here, and just have a quick look while I just have a little read over my notes here. And this again is just looking at this bottom chart here is how we are paid in the field by the hour, the day rate on a salary, and then contracting. So that's ABN and then some others there. It's relatively like evenly spread, with the day rate is a little bit higher than by the hour and on the salary. I thought it was important just to compare these 3 charts to say we're agreeing when we work on a contract, I might be agreeing to 7 to 9 hours, but I'm working a lot more. So it's just interesting to have a think about if I'm being paid with the day rate, but I'm working these 16-hour days, am I being paid for that time? And just to have a look across all of those 3 charts to make to think about that.
Hugh, I might be assuming too much in this, but do you feel that the guys that contributed to this survey, do they know what award they're based off? Have they got that understanding that their pay or their contract is based on X award?
I would say that a lot of people might not know.
Okay. It's interesting. I'll talk about it later, but we had that contracting versus employment session last week, which for me, it was an incredible eye-opener. And, you know, I don't want to underestimate the impact it has on our industry, that case law recently. And this is even highlighting it even more, that the information that that session gave puts a hell of a lot of people at risk in this space. But we'll talk about that later. I'll let you keep going because I know you've got to go soon. Thanks, Hugh.
No, thank you. So, great. So this is one of the most positive things I think I saw out of the survey, and it's another thing that gets talked about quite consistently. Is first aid kits, and it was really good to see that the majority of people are being provided first aid kits, and they don't have to maintain them either. So that was really good to see that the majority of our employees are experiencing that in the outdoors. So this next one, when I put this together, I was contemplating whether to include this particular slide or not. But I think what it tells is that it sort of tells a bit of a story about where some employees are at. And then, so it's just talking about whether their employer is doing something well that they want to talk about. And I found it interesting that over 50% of people said no. And for me, I've just found that a little alarming. It's like, what's happening for these employees at their workplace that they're not going like, my employer is doing this really well and I want to tell people about it. And I just think that that's something that we should just be aware of and to work on together. Okay. So another pretty positive thing that came out of this survey was that we can see that the majority of people are on an employment or contract agreement. It's good to see that gone are the days if you just rock up, you do your work and you just go home. There's no agreement or anything that's there. So this was a really positive thing to see. Obviously, you can see some things there that people might not even know. There was a small percentage there that weren't really aware of their employment situation, which I think is an education thing is that we can work on in time. And there is a small percentage there that are not on any form of agreement as well. So we've gone over quite a few different charts and compared some data. And I've talked about some of my key comparisons and takeaways from all of this information. But what I would like to sort of finish up with is talk about where to from here with the data and some things that I think are important. And one thing I like to highlight is I'm not trying to solve any particular issues with this data. It's merely like we've got some information, and then going forward, what do we do with it? And help to identify them. I think also it's important to talk about some ideas that I've heard around paying conditions, and that is being consistent, simplicity, and transparency. Now, with consistency, I'm just going to talk a little bit, start with that. Now, the next slide, I randomly just grabbed 2 bits of data anonymously and put them in a chart next to each other so that we can have a look and talk about consistency and why it is important. So we can see here, we've got someone from the Northern Territory and someone from Tasmania. Both work overnight in field and casual. They both work long hours. One doesn't get any form of overnight allowance and one does. One covers some form of training and one does not. And so you can see there's only some small differences there, but there's no consistency between the 2 experiences. And so for that idea of me as an employee to go from one to the next and know how I'm going to be employed and not to get any rude shocks as well, I think is an important thing going forward from here. And there's simplicity. So at the moment, one of the things that makes it complicated is, as I think there was a question before, is like there's numerous different awards, which makes it quite hard. How am I going to be paid? What am I being paid for? So it's easy for the employer to know how their employees are going to be employed, and easy for that employee to show up and know their situation. So I think that simplicity is an important thing going forward from here. And then transparent, being open, that we've got absolutely nothing to hide up front to the industry about how we are operating as employers and employees, because what have we really got to hide in a place where we are proud of how we employ people? And I think that's another really important thing. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions or anything you want to talk about, that would be great.
Yeah, I have to say the one thing that struck me when I came into the industry was the data was quite absent in a lot of different spectrums, and I applaud you for going about your way and trying to get that data. I think it's a great start. We've got to do more of this to understand some of the intricacies and challenges and dissect the way that, you know, even Dom was saying, you know, okay, what does that group mean? What does this group mean? I think that's certainly important, but well done. I think it's a great start. Has anyone got any questions for Hugh on any of that and how he's going to solve this going forward?
Solve it, that's Laurie.
We can all solve it together here. Yeah,
well,
actually, I think, Laurie, sorry, yeah. I was just going to say, I think having discussions like this is the first step towards solving it. Like that's the same with the stuff that we did out of the National Summit last year, the ICA, but we've got to have these sort of discussions and get this sort of info. Yeah. Or it's always going to be there just in the background when it actually needs to be brought forward.
Mm.
And sorry, just to finish up, you saw at the start there's actually a sheet that's been put together with all of the charts and data on it that's in a PDF file that can be sent. And then this last month, I had another survey running that was asking industry, what do we do with the data? Because that decision is not up to me alone. I think that needs to be made from an industry as a whole, because this information is important. And that has closed, but essentially was asking people whether it goes to a peak body, whether we go to make an award, whether it goes to a panel to review, and a whole bunch of things, so that we have a little bit of guidance about what the people out there want done with this information they've put forward.
Brilliant. Dave, you had a question? You just
I turn myself off. So what do you think, Hugh, the next step should be? Did you have any feeling of how do we take this now and do something not only with it, but take another step, even if it's a small one?
Well, I suppose I think the thing for me is I want it to be seen that this is no vendetta from me against employers. I think that's really important. And I want whatever happens next to be fair and measured for the whole industry. So say, for example, if this information goes to be put forward for review, so say we have a group of people, I think that those people who review it, we should come from all walks of the industry. So it should be people who run businesses. It also should be people who work on the ground, so that we have people with multiple different lenses looking at it and can put forward whatever recommendation needs to be made to the industry. Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other questions for Hugh?
Am I hooked up?
Yep. You're right,
Yep.
Alan.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, I think the information is very interesting to see. Perhaps a few little observations. I think in the broader sense of the industry, we need to be careful not to get too prescriptive, so that different people's operations can function in a way that suits their purpose and goal, so that we don't prescribe everything to everybody. But maybe we give guidelines or alert people to topics or issues. Maybe of interest is, now this is a while ago, but when I used to survey staff and ask them, what do they want? More money or more time off? It was very consistent. They want more time off. The money, not so important. Now, I don't know, I mean, maybe that's changed in more recent times, but that was really consistent. And so the staff packaging that we created had that built into it, that people who did more time in the field or whatever got a lot more time off than the people who worked in the office. The other thing is, I recall asking someone many years ago what he thought about a lot of this stuff, and he was a director of an outward bound centre, and he said when he asked new staff where do they see their career, and they would say, I see myself being in this industry forever. And his response was, so you want my job in 3 years' time? Because he said it was very difficult for people to sustain the level of engagement and involvement over a long period.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, 2 months ago, I had a meeting or a dinner with a bunch of people I used to employ 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and asked them, what are they up to? I was extremely surprised about the number of them who were saying they are working on a casual basis and they're happy. they are choosing what they would like to do. They are cognitive of the differences between the organisations they're working for, and they accept those differences. And sometimes they choose to work and sometimes they choose not to because of those differences. But it gives them what they feel is the freedom they need or they want.
I think it's a really good
there
point,
are
Alan.
variations in everything, price, pay and everything. The other one that I learned a long time ago, and I don't know whether it still applies, is, and other people could make comments, is that a lot of people come into the industry because it suits their where they're at in life, and doing these sorts of adventurous things suits them for a period in their life, and then they go on, they move on, they become doctors, teachers, whatever, but they move on. But this becomes a very, it's very significant for them at the time. I mean, I got a letter from a staff member of 30 years ago just yesterday, and he said if he hadn't gone through those experiences, he would not be where he's at now. He wouldn't have wanted to do it forever, but he is where he's at now because of what happened, what he did, what he was asked to do. So
I think you raise a good point.
So that's a few things, but I'm a bit, I think we do need to make the industry more attractive for people because the industry's growing, but I think we've got to be careful not to corporatize it or homogenize it in such a way that we destroy the spirit of it. We need to make sure the spirit stays there.
Look, it's an interesting comment, and I'd love to explore it more, but I know we're running out of time and Hugh has to leave us. But yeah, Steve and Dave, do you have a quick question for Hugh, and then we'll jump on to the next topics?
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. Hugh, I might be coming in, I've been a little bit distracted, and I'm certainly coming in cold to the exercise, but and a couple of people have mentioned, oh, good, we can move forward and solve the problems now, but what's the problem you're trying to solve?
Good point. Very good point. Yep. Hugh, did you want to add?
So one thing that sticks out to me is, I suppose it goes back to those 3 points, like there's something to go forward with, but they're also something that's not happening right now. So I think we don't have consistency as an industry about how we employ people and how we engage people. And it's not simple as well.
So, but to go forward, you've got to clearly identify what the problem is you're trying to solve.
Correct.
You've got some data there that underpins various opportunities, but to go forward, you've got to be, I think you've got to be more explicit in what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's and I think for me, it's, sorry, Kellen, you go.
I was just going to say, I guess, Hugh, I think it's great work that you're doing. And you did say earlier that there is no award for our industry at all. And I think we're working on the Amusements and Recreation Award, which is for carnival operators.
There's 5 that we currently use.
And there's a Sport and Fitness Award, a Miscellaneous Award that gets used, and some others as well.
Social community.
Yeah, so I think it's great stuff.
But to answer Steve's question, I'd like to take that a little step further and say we have an industry that does not have enough staff to cope. I think that's the problem we're trying to solve. You know, first and foremost, we're under-resourced. We've got, we can't attract people to the industry at the moment. And Alan, I hear what you're saying, and I totally agree the sentiments there. But there's a reason why we are struggling with insurance. There is a reason why we are not able to staff our industry, and there's a lot of other underlying factors that we need to bring together. And I think, you know, these discussions certainly help that. Sorry, Dave, I'll quickly throw to you before I let Hugh go.
Yeah, I think what we've got to achieve is staff availability and retention. They're probably the things that we're currently facing. It's interesting, one of the biggest time off, speaking to a couple of the players and some smaller in my world, staff are wanting more flexibility with their time, less work, ability to have time off like a normal person, I think somebody said.
Yeah, normal person. What is normal these days? Yes, good point. Hugh, the other Hugh.
Yeah, look, great work, younger Hugh, other Hugh. I think it's really good to have some data around that we can make decisions off, because it's always, anecdotal stuff and thoughts and feelings are good, but having data that we can fall back on to really to sort of make some informed decisions is fabulous, and it's something that we haven't had before. I think one of the things that stands out to me from that data is there's some things where, and whilst agreeing with Alan's point about maintaining sort of flexibility, that there's some stuff that we're obviously not meeting as an industry, like there's some legislative requirements that we're not consistently meeting, that we probably need to get in and do something about, like PDQ, really. But like I say, great data. We would never be able to do it without the data. It would just be talking for.
Exactly.
So it's fabulous. Yeah, good on you, mate.
Great, thanks. Caro.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hey, yeah, thanks Hugh for all the work that you put into this. This is great to actually see the evidence and to see real analytics and statistics around I guess real data around what we've heard anecdotally for so long. And just to answer the question about what's the problem to be solved, and obviously I come from a very different place to you guys, but in terms of it feels like there's problems for both employers, clients, and for guides for the people the employees here. And it just sort of feels like the start of being able to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people that we may not sort of be able to clearly identify as much as I think it was Dave who was just saying then, the employment, the recruitment issues within the industry. But, I think one thing we can all agree on is that we are all advocates for the outdoors. We all know and love and highly value the outcomes that we all know the outdoors and spending time in the outdoors, whether you be a young person or, an adult, that we give us. And to be able to position and establish the industry as yes, not being too descriptive and tying ourselves down too much, but establishing ourselves as something that's truly professional industry, and an industry that people want to be a part of, that we can look at the reasons why they leave to become doctors and lawyers and go, well, actually, maybe we can offer them stuff to keep that incredible wealth of knowledge and experience within the industry, and so we're not losing people, and so we can keep doing what we know is of value to the whole community, and that's by offering these opportunities to introduce people to it in meaningful ways.
Yeah, dead right. Well said. Thanks, Caro. I think it's many of you have heard the conversations we've had around trying to build in the career side, and I'll touch a little bit on that again today. But yeah, I think it's great. And Hugh, thank you so much. I know it's hard to grab you and present this content, but it was great to share that. And thank you so much again for pulling it all together. It's one step in the right direction.
No, my pleasure. And thank you very much to everyone for listening. And yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, we might jump on to the rest of the session because we do have quite a lot to cover, but I'm just going to quickly run through a couple of aspects that are reminders to everyone. And obviously with the nature of the weather at the moment, it's incredibly important that I send the message to everyone to please remember to review your planning when it comes to some of the areas in which we're operating at the moment. There's been some unfortunate incidents across the country and in various states, and we just need to be on top of our own planning to make sure we're doing the right thing by our people and our staff. I touched on it with Hugh's session, but I can't reiterate enough how important this case law is for our industry. And as I say, I'm not I'm not underestimating the shock that I had and the impact that this is going to have on our industry. So if you want to certainly listen to that session, it is online. You can go to our services menu and download that session. It was rated 4.7 out of 5 stars by the attendees on the day. So obviously people are walking away from that session with some great content to help them and protect them going forward from here. We attended the Litter Congress this week with the Build Australia Beautiful campaign, and we were there with Take 3 for the Sea and presenting the First Wave project. It was a great exposure for the project and for us, of course, and great conversations around how we reduce litter in the environment so that we can have a better place to operate. Now, that being said, the next stage of this is coming up, and you'll hear from Take 3 for the Sea on the 22nd of April, after Easter. Helen is off to the Blue Mountains on Sunday to run some fun activities at Youth Week. So again, a reminder to all our members, if you want to be part of this activity, please let Helen know. There's some great prizes on offer. She's got some great activities to engage, and we're going to be sharing with them the hot off the press career content that we've been building to try to get youth engaged, to Cara's point, getting them interested in our industry and to consider it as part of a career choice. The mentoring programs are just exploding. So our current mentor program next session is on the 20th of April. The cohort number 2 will start in October. The EOIs for that are open at the moment because I want to make sure that we're matching from the learnings of this one, matching the right people to the right mentees. And the ACT has just got funding to run a women's mentoring program specific for outdoor industry operators. So big thanks to ACT, obviously Patty Palin for supporting this program, and the sessions that we ran in March were supported by Small Business Month. So a lot of great stuff going on there, and thank you for those involved. A massive congratulations to Outward Bound. This was a great proposal, a big content proposal that was put up through a grant program. And yesterday we found that they were successful in this project. This actually is going to be fabulous for the industry as a whole. It's a national centre for outdoor risk and readiness that will be built at Tharwa in ACT. They are opening up their establishment to help the whole outdoor industry in looking at risk and readiness. And 3.7 million was awarded to Outward Bound for this project. So incredibly proud to support this project, and well done to Lauren and the team who managed to get this going. Look forward to watching it develop. Curriculum reform, my God, Cara listened. Great stuff. We saw in print, black and white, strengthening the focus on students being physically active and content with a focused activity in natural and outdoor settings. Guys, use this. Talk to your schools. Tell them that ACARA is backing us in what we need to do and take more opportunities outdoors. That includes things like English and maths. So right now, the New South Wales curriculum is in consultation mode. If you feel strongly about connecting your opportunities with the curriculum, then have your say. ACARA showed us by putting up our comment, they listened and they adapted. So get in there and make sure that you're telling them exactly what we can do on the curriculum to make sure these kids come out a better person. And we know we can help in that area. Stage 5 outdoor education resources are looking great, and they're up on the website. If you're talking to schools that are looking at endorsing this stage 5 elective, point them to the website, help them out, and certainly let them know that they can reach out to me and I can certainly help them connect with the curriculum. And as I say, hot off the press, thanks to Helen for all her work in this, and the others on getting the content ready. So this is a document that is now available on our website. It's under Work in the Outdoors, and it takes students or people that are looking at the career through what it could look like, the journey that they can take through education and where they could end up in part of the industry. So it's a, oops, sorry, that was my fault. Yeah, so it's a great tool that we can actually share. Helen will be sharing it with the Youth Week participants this weekend. We'll be sharing as we go around the state with the REAP activities. So it'll be a great tool that we can promote. Membership update, another reminder, please jump in there and make sure we've got all your correct details. As we transition over to the members only section, we want to make sure that you've got access to what you need. So jump in there and make sure we've got your right details so that you can continue to be informed. We mentioned this last week, but my goodness, the events have started. We've got a lot of events coming up. We will be at all of these different events, and it's just there in case you see that that's something that you also want to attend. So make sure you have a look at the website and jump in and register if you want to be there. Now, we have some very exciting news. We have Steve and Brian online, who are both from our trail and adventure bike subcommittee. Now, this group started in 2020 when we were working with the MCC on some of the challenges that trail bike riders have in accessing property, also reputational issues, various other things that they continue to battle with. So we got together and for now, what is a year and a half, we've been pulling together data from surveys and discussing how we can path the way forward. What we've produced is a white paper, which is a summary document on the discussion paper. And can I just say thanks to Steve and Brian, because they did amazing work in the content of this discussion paper. And I'll show you some brief pages through it. But what they were able to bring as information to this is really the success of this project. And I thank them immensely for that. So quickly, the insights from the white paper, it went into detail around who are trail bike and adventure bike riders. A lot of them are between the ages of 35 and 54. They actually ride up to 34 times a year. They're committed to this activity and mostly utilize state forests. Probably when we look at this, people don't understand the economic value of these riders either. So we delved into that. And what we were able to show is that what we estimate, and this is the data issue again, what we estimate to be approximately 75,000 riders across the state and territory, they told us that they're spending $524 per trip per person. That's a huge expenditure on a tourism or a travelling aspect. And that equated to 619 million into local communities across regional areas. And you can see the heat diagram there, or the heat map, that they are quite dispersed in regional areas. And where they're spending their money, needless to say, we knew that fuel will be up there, but they're spending it in food and accommodation and camping as well, other areas, which adds value to communities right across regional areas. And to the point about the 75,000 riders, we've got to get more understanding on how many are out there. And that was one of the biggest challenges that we had. So as a quick summation, we came up with 4 things that we really want to push forward in working with stakeholders to try to get change for this. Point number 1 was being recognised as a legitimate activity. We've got to remember that people go into different activities in the outdoors for many different reasons. This one, it was highly rated for mental health and social well-being, connecting with friends, connecting with people with similar likes and dislikes, and actually, yeah, doing it for their own mental health. Number 2, we want to work with stakeholders, including government and private land managers, to look at a strategic plan across the board, enabling some access, more access to single track. And I'll get Steve and Brian to highlight some of the areas that are ringing true for them in this. But the third one was to investigate a potential recreation registration that provides an opportunity for funding and growing opportunities, that we could look at better compliance. One thing we do know with this area is that people do not register their bikes to do this activity, even though legally they have to. So it's a big challenge when we're stumbling through some of the needs of the industry. And the fourth one there is establishing a rider code of conduct. We understand that there are those few that bring disrepute to the knowledge that some people hold around trail biking. A code of conduct will help to discourage that disruptive behaviour, because that is working in complete opposition to what we want to achieve with a strategic plan. So there's a lot of content in the discussion paper, but I might hand over to Steve and Brian to certainly highlight anything that they see that they wanted to bring to your attention today.
Okay, I suppose I can add a couple of things then.
Wonderful, Steve. Thank you.
Trail riders, I'm sure everyone here's got their perceptions of trail bike riders, dirt bike riders. You probably come across a few out in the bush yourselves from time to time. The reality is that there's a few out there that generally create negative impressions within society and the community, and we all get tarred with the same brush. Most of the guys out there are doing the right thing, and they're largely invisible. So we want to create some visibility for those that are doing the right thing and enable it. So I think that's what we're about.
Beautiful, well said. Brian, did you want to add anything to that?
Gotta go down there. Yeah, okay.
Not particularly. Other than, yes, we want to represent those who are doing the right thing, which in some cases are perhaps the invisible ones. There's quite a lot of what we call single track riding, and usually find once they get on those single tracks, they're rarely seen. It's those who are perhaps hanging around the car parks and picnic areas, making a nuisance of themselves, are those who are perhaps those who are most seen, but they're not the ones that we wish to represent or to wish to promote as a recreational activity.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. And just to reiterate, and I'll hand over to David Chitty for his question, but you can see there, this is the discussion paper. It's 48 pages of in-depth content relating to every single area that has been somewhat either a perception or a challenge associated with this activity. And that's what I mean by the level of content and data that has gone into this. It's been an incredible piece of work, and I feel privileged to have sat alongside Stephen and Brian through this, as well as Reese and Mike Hill from Forestry New South Wales and some of our own board members. Dave Chitty, you had a question.
It was a statement to some degree. I mean, I grew up riding trail bikes, scrambling and, bush bashing and other types of things, as many people did. It's a great introduction to many young people to the outdoors, and things like that. Years ago, when we started the Adventure Activity Standards, we did put on the list of things to do is not just to have good practice guides or standards for lead groups, but to have a set of some sort of standards or guidelines for all of the recreational activities that might occur. And I think this is a good opportunity to maybe set a template for this type of activity that could then be used in all of those others that either don't fit into dependent groups.
Yes, yep, very good point. Thanks, Dave. Hugh, you had a question?
Yeah, I do. Thanks for presenting. I think I'm having some of my perceptions challenged at the moment, which is probably a good thing. I spend a lot of time out on the Nunes Plateau, guiding canyoning and bushwalking and things up there. And I actually ride a motorcycle as well, like a little BMW off-road thing, although I'm not terribly capable on it. But I'd be really keen to know from Steve and Brian that both of you guys talked about that sort of the people that are just not seen and invisible are the people that are doing the right thing. We don't see and hear from them. And just keen to know your thoughts on what sort of, are they the majority? Are they 60, 70, 80, 99%? Where do you think that, what's that ratio look like?
Good question.
Difficult to put a number on it. My personal view, I'm pushing 70 these days. I still get out on my dirt bikes. I got into dirt bikes back in 1990 when I moved into the bush. I live in a rural property out of Cooma, bush block, and having been a lifelong motorcyclist, I then had the opportunity to start further exploring the bush on a motorcycle rather than what I've been doing otherwise. And also in my work as a surveyor in the mountains, you know, exploring the mountains and all the rest of it on foot, so, and helicopter and all the other various means we have. I've been involved with a few rider groups and clubs over the years as well. I've done some racing, dirt bike racing. I entered my first motocross race when I was 44 years old. So I got I think a fair handle on it. I'd speculate that it's less than 10% of our 75,000 regular dirt bike riders that are the problem that we have in the industry, out there in the community.
Right.
Yeah, I'd also add, I think there were numbers in the report as to the ages of those who completed the survey.
That's right.
I think it's very much like on-road riders. The average age of the owner of a registered road bike is 42. So it's not young ones who are into road riding, and the same I think can be said for off-road riding. So once they've got to that more mature age, they do realise that the activity is something that needs to be sustainable. You know, they want to not just ride there today, but ride there in 5-10 years' time. So it's that approach that we need to encourage. I guess
often it's seen as something of a midlife crisis. You know, young people get exposed to a motorbike in some form or other for a year or two in their late teens, early 20s perhaps, and then life and family and careers and things take over. And once that settles down, someone's in their 40s and they've got time and money and they look for something to do, and they remember how good motorcycling was and they get back into it. And that's both road bikes and dirt bikes.
But I guess, Hugh, certainly the Newnes Plateau is a hot topic among riders because of the fact being converted over to the Gardens of Stone State Conservation Area. So I'd probably be interested in talking to you more about how you sort of view what happens on the Newnes Plateau, and how hopefully we might be able to sort of work together so all the groups can, because I mean, it's a huge area, a great resource, but let's try and share it so that all groups are, get a positive outcome.
I remember a number of years ago, I'm a pretty passionate rock climber. A number of years ago, there were starting to be some bans on rock climbing in the Grampians down in Victoria. And one of the reasons that was cited for the bans was climbing and placing bolts in proximity to Indigenous artwork. And it turned out not to be the case, but I thought at the time, if that's true, then we shouldn't have access to these places because we're really not exercising our duty of care on them. And I wonder a little bit if Newnes might be a similar thing. There's lots, and we're having a huge impact out there, and it's pretty confronting actually. So yeah, it'd be, maybe I'll drop my phone number into the chat, Brian. We could have a gossip later on.
Yeah, we have met with one of the Aboriginal Land Council or corporations because there is an Aboriginal area there. We're certainly mindful that those sort of cultural areas or other smaller sites that might be there, that they need to be protected. So, where necessary, trails have either got to be closed off or redirected to avoid those areas.
Dom, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. I guess it's sort of an observation a little bit, or it is a question, I suppose. I noticed as you scrolled through there's a couple of things. There's a whole section on noise.
Yes.
But there was also a section on electrification of trail bikes.
Yes.
And I'm just dealing with some of the multi-use trails, and particularly where trail bikes are allowed in particularly state forests. A lot of other users feels safe, like when they can hear a trail bike coming. And I think there's actually an additional concern out there that as trail bikes become electrified more and they become more capable but still fast, it could be that a trail bike comes zipping around a corner without that well-announced warning of that I'm coming. And it's actually another, I don't know if you guys have discussed this, but it's just another one that's come up that I don't know that, well, I certainly don't have a handle on it yet, but it's just another one that
it's something that it's certainly topical, and it's not restricted to motorbikes or electrically assisted bicycles either. It's electrification of motor vehicles generally. You know, but pedestrians, as much as they use their sight, they also use their hearing before they step off the curb. So it's a challenge for the industry across the board to address, and there's various noisemakers that are being associated, you know, artificial noise generation associated with motor vehicles. So I don't think there's a real answer to that yet, but it's certainly something that has to be worked through.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Dom.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you guys for that. That's an awesome discussion paper. I might be downloading it and having a good look, I think. Thank you.
And I think it's actually well overdue, because New South Wales is probably the only state that doesn't have a strategy for trail riding. So, you know, if you don't have a strategy or a plan, well, you've got to expect that there are going to be friction points and issues that, you know, could be resolved if some thought and resources were put towards trying to resolve them.
Yep, and we've got election coming up next year in the States, so now's the time to get in there and start having those discussions. So that's great. Guys, we've gone over time, but I do want to start the conversation. This is awesome. And again, big thanks to Steve and Brian for all the work that they've done on this. As you can see, it's a big piece of work. And we're just really proud to get that out there now. Let's continue the conversation. Let's get every activity understood as being benefits to our communities, and keep doing what you're doing. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you if you're at Connect and Share. Next Friday is not on because it's Good Friday, but we do have happy hour this afternoon to celebrate for Easter, and then we will connect again on the 22nd. Oh, that seems so far away, but it's not. 22nd of April. All right, guys, have a great week. Take care.
Yep. Thank you.